Hello, today we're going to look at the Great British Gold Swindle, and this took place in 1914, and things back then were a lot different to how they are now. For example, people back then, they didn't have bank accounts. People used cash and were paid in cash, and the highest denomination that they had back then was the £1 coin, also known as the gold sovereign. And there were millions of these in circulation. And the government back then somehow managed to get everyone to hand those gold sovereigns in, and they were replaced with paper. And how did the government do this? Well, I'm going to read this article from the Royal Mint, and we'll just go through what this is saying. Okay, so the sovereign in the First World War. Leading up to the First World War, the sovereign had been, since its return in 1817, a 22-carat gold coin worth £1 or 20 shillings. By the 20th century, it was firmly established as part of Britain's circulating currency. However, gold was playing a much less important role in the nation's coinage. When the First World War broke out, the sovereign had already survived several attempts at its withdrawal, but even the chief coin of the world could not survive the effects of conflict. Within days of the outbreak of war, August the 4th, 1914, the government asked the public to hand in its gold sovereigns. The government used the precious metal to pay off its international debt, support the Bank of England's reserves, and finance the war effort. Only a day after the outbreak of war, the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, David Lloyd George, explained just how important it was. And let's have a look at the level of propaganda that he says that he comes out with here. And he says, anyone who, from selfish motives of greed or from excessive caution or cowardice, goes out of his way to attempt to withdraw sums of gold and appropriate them to his own use, let it be clearly understood that he is assisting the enemies of his native land, and he is assisting them more effectively, probably, than if he were to take up arms. Wow. Now that is propaganda there, isn't it? You know, the guilt tripping of everyone. And bear in mind that your son, your nephew, your father, your uncle, you know, all your family members are going off to fight in this war, you know, and you being guilt tripped into helping, you know, and doing whatever you can to help in this great war, you know, and people fell for it. They handed in the gold sovereigns, and I'll carry on. I'll read the article. So, the sovereign's replacement. On August the 7th, 1914, imagine how quickly they did that. It must have been planned for them to react that quickly. There's no conceivable way that quickly they can get all this done. No way. Anyway, on August 7th, 1914, the UK government issued 2 treasury notes. One was worth £1, while the other was worth 10 shillings. And they were designed to replace the gold sovereigns. The government also printed posters with a message, "The British sovereign will win." Obviously the king's the sovereign, and the coin is the coin of the realm, the sovereign. The British sovereign, and urged people to hand in their gold sovereigns at their nearest post office. In return, people would be given the new treasury notes. People responded in their thousands, and the new notes soon replaced the gold coins. By the summer of 1915, gold was no longer a regular part of the nation's coinage. It was an incredible change, as before the war there had been around 100 million of gold coinage in circulation. By the end of the war, all that precious metal had been withdrawn. In fact, the campaign didn't just bring domestic circulation of the sovereign to an end, but it also ended the use of gold in circulation in Britain. Gold didn't disappear entirely from the British Mint's presses, though, as the Mint continued to make gold sovereigns during the war that were used to strengthen the Bank of England's gold reserves. By 1918, the Royal Mint had stopped producing the gold sovereign altogether, and branch mints across the Commonwealth substantially lowered their production, with only the Ottawa Mint increasing its production. The coin didn't reappear again until 1957, when the Royal Mint started producing gold sovereigns as bullion coins. Okay, so 100 million of gold coinage was handed in to be replaced by paper. So there you're saying, well, they didn't really steal the gold coins, they replaced a £1 coin for a £1 note. But when we have a look at the inflation calculator, and I don't even believe this inflation calculator, but the Bank of England inflation calculator, so they have in 1914 £10, and what that cost in 1918. So in 1918 it was £20.31. So they basically, with inflation, you'd been completely fleeced. You know, to pay for this war effort, 50% of your money had basically been stolen. And that is the UK's got to be the UK's greatest gold swindle. You know, you handed your money in and you got fleeced. You simply you got a gold coin worth a week's pay, and now all of a sudden that gold coin is still worth the same amount of money, but you got given paper worth half as much just 4 years later. But worse was to come. In fact, the working class person, and if you look on this UK Parliament site, so someone on a low wage of around about £50 a year, so that's 50 gold sovereigns a year, they were paying about 8% income tax, thereabouts. But you know what? After the war, that income tax went up to around about 30%. So not only had you handed in your gold sovereigns to pay for this war, but after the war you also were paying 30% income tax, when before that you were paying something around about 6%. You know, war is a complete and utter racket. There's no question about it. I mean, people were guilt tripped into handing their gold sovereigns in to try and hopefully win this war that they won. But how stupid was it for people to hand in the gold when the people that they sent to fight in this war were told to go and charge machine guns? You know, they were slaughtered. They were absolutely slaughtered in the most pointless war. Well, every war is pointless. And to be honest with you, I've never benefited from any war ever. And the general public could just never benefit from any of these wars. All that happens is the rich get richer from war, and the ordinary working class person basically gets completely fleeced in one way or another. You know, by handing in your wealth in the form of gold sovereigns, like what happened here, and then even after that you won the war, you still have to pay for it again by the fact that your income tax has basically gone to almost a third when it was only 6% before that. So there we have it. That is the great British gold swindle, and I'm sure there's a lesson to be learnt there. Alright, well, thank you for joining me, and to let you know, there's also another great British gold swindle, and I'll make another video on that another day. But this is all for now. Thank you. Bye bye.